This is from the first chapter, and chapter 1, page 1. It wasn't the first time a girl cried rape when her belly bloomed beyond the confines of her waistband. Yet in Lorena's case, no one doubted it was true. She'd always been a serene and modest girl, and when her passage through puberty transformed her into an alluring beauty with dark and mysterious eyes, her humility proved sincere, for she wasn't moved by the compliments lavished upon her by friends and strangers alike. She merely accepted their praise with no more than a gentle bow of her head. Mothers in the village used her as an example for their daughters to follow, but most of the other girls preferred playing with their emerging sexuality as if they'd happened upon the switch that turns on the sun and couldn't be persuaded not to touch. They enlisted Lorena in their teasing games with the hope of convincing their mothers that the Blessed Virgin herself was not in their midst. But Lorena didn't need to unfasten the third button of her blouse or sneak her mother's lipstick to be noticed. She was simply beautiful, the way the dawn is beautiful, without embellishment or pride. It was rumored by some that she'd been born to royalty and had floated in a basket across the ocean to Mexico, the way Moses floated down the Nile to Egypt. Of course, no one could conceive of a destiny appropriate for royalty in the dusty village of Salhuero, outside Guadalajara, where Lorena lived. And when imagination succumbed to jealousy, it was the same group of girls who reminded all interested parties, especially the young men, that she, along with her older sister Carmen, had been born in a brothel the next village over and had been taken in by the devoutly religious widow, Gabriela. Nobody was certain what had happened to their mother, whether she died in childbirth or had abandoned her children as so many women in her situation did. Such undesirable parentage would have discouraged better prospects, but countless suitors, intrigued by the modest beauty, overlooked her past and made their intentions known as honorably and fervently as they could. And when the time was right for Lorena to consider marriage, she tolerated endless suggestions and directions from her mother and sister about who was the best match, as this was an opportunity for the family to better its station by a prosperous arrangement. Lorena, I came here to Finland thinking, well, I'm going to talk about Signor Peregrino, and I don't think that there's anybody in Finland that knows my family, so it's probably okay that I share this secret. But my grandfather was an incredible storyteller, and he was a great influence in my life, and certainly a great influence in my deciding to write stories. Although I think of myself as a storyteller, as my grandfather was, more than as a writer. And some years ago, he said to me, well, I was 15, so it was more than some years ago. It was actually another lifetime ago. I was going to go to Spain, and he wanted me to know something about what happened, because my grandfather left Spain when he was about 21 years old, and he never went back.
And that was when?
Well, that was 1909.
Okay.
I mean, it was, you know, very early in the turn of the century. And he was the oldest of many children. And you see, in Spain, the oldest of many children, even today it's changing, inherits the lion's share. And that's why so many Spaniards, especially from the north, left, because they didn't get anything. Their older child got everything, but everyone else was poor. But my grandfather was the oldest, and he still left and never went back, and which was a great mystery to us. We didn't know why he would do that. So one day I went to go see him after school, as I often did, because I loved him very, very much. He was making soup, as he was a good cook as well, and we were going to have some of his soup together. And he said, you know, I need to tell you something before you go to Spain, because I want you to hear it from me and not from anybody else. You might hear this when you go. And I immediately knew that this was something special, something important. And he said, when I was a young man, before I met your grandmother, many years before I met your grandmother in Spain, there was a young woman that I loved very much, and her name was Rosa. And the name of the love interest here in the story is also Rosa. So this story was in some ways very much inspired by my grandfather's experience. And he said, but I was not the only one who loved Rosa. There was another young man who loved her too. And there was going to be a big dance in the village. And I was warned that if I went to this dance and danced with Rosa, because she loved me, not the other man, that he would kill me. But living in a village, and if you allowed yourself to be controlled by a threat like that, you lost total respect. You could not do that. By a bully. And people told him, if you're going to go to this dance, you better go armed. Don't go by yourself without a pistol, because you don't know what could happen. So my grandfather went with a pistol. And he was also a very, very good hunter. He hunted to feed his family and hunted rabbit and small game in the countryside. So he took his gun and he went hoping that nothing would happen. He was dancing with Rosa there at the plaza with lights in the trees, and sure enough, the other young man showed up, became very angry when he saw that my grandfather was dancing with the woman that he loved. He took out his gun and he shot my grandfather, but he missed. And before he could shoot again, he was preparing to shoot again, my grandfather pulled out his gun and he shot, but he did not miss. My grandfather was a very, very good hunter and a very good shot, and he killed him. And he immediately went into hiding to get away, because he didn't know what was going to happen. Even though there were many witnesses and they saw that he was just defending himself. He wasn't the first one to shoot, but still, this was, you know, back in 1909. It was vigilante days in parts in Spain. You never knew what could happen. And so he hid with some friends, but eventually they found him. He went to trial, and he was found innocent or not guilty for reasons of self-defense. Nevertheless, he knew that even if the courts had found him not guilty, that the brothers of the young man who'd been killed would not see it that way. They were out to get him no matter what. And he knew that he was a marked man, and that he had to leave if he hoped to save his life. So he left. And he couldn't go back, you see, because those brothers were still there. It was a small community, and the only way he could make sure to live was to leave and never return. And his wife had died already. My grandmother had died when he told me the story. But he said that as much as he loved my grandmother, and they had a very close and wonderful marriage, that Rosa was still the love of his life. It was still this woman, the first love that he would never forget.